Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade, and I'm here with yet another, well, heavy video. Today's culture has got a serious problem, at least Western culture. We are plagued with an inability to we're plagued by an inability to behave on a common set of rules and values. It seems that with multiculturalism comes, well, different priorities and different rule sets. And when you have different priorities and different rule sets making up a wide, diverse number of people across Western civilizations that are entrenched in peaceful discourse, then you end up with a kind of debate like Battleground of different sides trying to get their way. I kind of have just described politics, haven't I? Yes. So if we were to simplify this, we could call this the old adage of the left versus the right inside of the political sphere. But that would be oversimplification at its finest. Really, the problem is far more complex, but not actually that complex when you boil it all down. There is a failed thought process that equity in all things is a necessary part of advancements of civilization. Now let's really think about what the word equity means. If you would ask most left types or people in general, equity is, equality. It's all things being equal. The white man, the black man, the red man, the yellow man, the woman, the white woman, the black woman, the yellow woman, everybody's equal. And you know what? That's actually true. But all of those different people currently operate under different guidelines. Oriental people who grew up in a different geographical section of the world have a different environment, and therefore they prioritize different things to be important to them based off of their environmental interpretation of their environment, not to mention the lifetimes of generations that have come before them. So the way one thinks is not completely up to themselves. It's also partially ingrained into your DNA, and your mother and father have some part to do with how you are at a very varied section of you that one could almost correlate to having a certain type of instincts, like animals know to do certain things. It's ingrained in their DNA. Well, humans are no different. We develop tendencies, and those tendencies have been ingrained in many, many generations of progeny. But now back to the focus of pop culture. Um, the pop culture inside of the Western society is becoming one of the new battlegrounds. The internet is obviously an easy source for communications and or serves as a marvelous place to have um, battle debate and or battles about politics or this political spectrum within the pop culture environment. Then there's also other things that play into this. So recently, well, for the past 15, 20 years, left-leaning professors have been dominating the humanities classes inside of the majority of universities throughout Western countries. And while most of us know that humanities are, well, at least for me, they were probably the most useless classes I ever took in, uh, in college, and God knows they were a waste of money. It serves as a form of political indoctrination for a large group of individuals subjected to the thought processes of a far smaller group of individuals, i.e. the professors, who have been predominantly left-leaning. And thus, it served as a perfect way to indoctrinate a certain group of people inside of Western society to left-leaning tendencies. So that's one issue. Another major issue we're facing ourselves with right now is feminism, and how feminism is really starting to come to a halt. As you can see in my videos, I mean, just earlier today I was trying to enjoy my dinner when I was smacked with a very feminist version of a TV show by Dick Wolf known as FBI, and in particularly that episode totally threw identity politics at me, and it was pretty revolting. I will never watch that show again. Um, but that's a whole nother discussion. See, what's happening when the feminist agenda is promoting their rhetoric, where they want to empower a new generation of women, and they talk about inclusivity and all these buzzwords. They're typically doing so at the detriment of another group. And so what happens is some people who used to just be an individual, like me, I used to be an individual. I never considered myself, well, I've always considered myself male, but it wasn't, it wasn't that important. I've always considered myself white, but that never really was that important. I used to consider myself moderate. Now I consider myself right. The fact that I'm considering myself, I'm giving myself labels of white, male, right-leaning. I'm putting myself into a collective subset. 3 different collective subsets that I'm putting myself into, where 10 years ago I did not put myself inside of a collective subset, is because of the constant attacks that I am receiving as an individual by a collective. So in this case, I'm talking about feminism. Feminism is not all females. Feminism is a left-leaning subset of females that have decided to push some sort of agenda down everybody's throats, whether or not we want to hear it or not. And what it has done is it has pushed me into my collective states. It has pushed me to become a male. It has pushed me to become white. It has pushed me to become right. I am now part of those collectives. Instead of being the individual I used to be about 5-10 years ago. I never identified as being the mouthpiece from a political collective like I might find myself feeling like today. In fact, today I've even put myself into more collectives, like, for example, MGTOW. I consider myself MGTOW. I've had it with feminism. So let's think about that. Not that long ago, I was an individual. And now I'm part of a bunch of tribes. Is this necessarily good? Does this create the utopian future that many left-leaning people point at when they talk about communism and their ideals of what the future should look like? They often point at shows like Star Trek, right? Well, let's think about Star Trek a bit. Star Trek is usually on board a ship, and the ship usually has a chain of command. Somebody's the captain, somebody's the chief engineer, somebody's the executive officer. And so there is a hierarchy. So even inside of what many consider a very equitable utopian future, there is still a hierarchy at play. Not everyone is equal. Why? Because meritocracy. That's the part of Star Trek that the left conveniently leaves out when they talk about it. Meritocracy. What is meritocracy? Meritocracy is the need, or not the need, but it's the... It would be defined as the person best fit for the job will get the job. He or she will receive the promotion based off of the merits that they have created, that they have demonstrated. If you're going to be the next captain of the Enterprise, you better have a damn good resume filled with damn good merits to back up the fact that you're now going to become the captain of the Enterprise. And you could be a woman or you could be a man. It doesn't matter. You could be a chimpanzee for all Starfleet cares, as long as you have the required meritocracy, the merits that dictate that you deserve that post. And if you don't deserve that post, then you're not going to become the next captain of Starfleet's flagship vessel. So meritocracy is a very important thought process when we talk about the utopian future that many on the left point at when they try to say that communism is great and leftist ideals are great, because then they spout equality and equity. But all the equality and equity that is in Star Trek is also based on meritocracy. So even though they all have access to a replicator, and they can all replicate anything that they want to eat, and they don't necessarily need money anymore, there's still somebody in charge of another. There is still a hierarchy or chain of command, and that hierarchy is made up of meritocracy. The person who merits the position gets the position, not because there's not enough female captains in Starfleet. No, because that female demonstrated the required merits to deserve the position. Not because there's not enough black first officers in Starfleet. No, because that black man demonstrated that he is worthy of that position. That is meritocracy, and that is what's always conveniently left out of the conversation whenever the left starts talking about the utopian future of Star Trek. They don't want to talk about the fact that people need to deserve the jobs that they have. No, they just want to somehow redistribute wealth. Well, the redistribution of wealth is a wonderful thought process, but it doesn't work. Every time you try to redistribute wealth, wealth goes back to the 0.1%. That is just a fundamental mathematical economic principle that is a fact of just how it works. If you play Monopoly, somebody wins Monopoly. That might seem like a very simplified way of looking at economics, but that is the truth. When you are in a society based around money, 1% is going to control the majority of the wealth. And there's not really any way around that, no matter what you do. And it's not some evil scheme. It's just a mathematical reality of the situation. So let's continue to talk about feminism and the battleground that pop culture has become. Where have been some of the most recent battles? Let's see, how about the last version of Ghostbusters? That was a major feminist battleground, and it was pretty much a travesty of a movie. Not many people enjoyed it. That's because politics and feminism don't necessarily make for good pop culture. They don't necessarily make for good movies. Because, you know what? What is a good movie? A good movie is something that makes money. And in order to make good money, you don't try to piss off part of your clientele in the process. And so, in order to make the most money possible off of a movie, you want to make the largest part of your demographic as happy as possible. And so you don't want to piss off the white man, because that's part of your demographic that's going to be buying tickets. Now let's look at The Last Jedi, where we ruined white male heroes. So how many men grew up looking up to Luke Skywalker as a role model, or Han Solo as a role model? And what did we eventually do to Luke Skywalker and Han Solo in The Last Jedi? We certainly didn't end their story on any type of high note. In fact, we pretty much decimated everything that they stood for. But hey, that's all right, because the Force is female, and we went about trying to empower females by creating Rey, a woman who went through no actual training to become a Jedi, just magically became a Jedi, had no trials and tribulations like Luke went through, just magically was able to take on a Sith master and strike him down without any training. Where was her development as a person? How is she a female role model? Let's think about that. Is she a female role model? Not really. No. She's just a badass female, which Okay. Great. She's a badass female. Way to ruin badass male characters that men used to look up to, so we could make a badass female character who's not really a decent role model for women in the first place. It doesn't make sense. And it certainly didn't make Disney any money. In fact, it ruined what many considered to be the most profitable IP to ever exist. Star Wars was the most powerful IP to ever exist monetarily by many predictions. And now it's a shell of what it used to be. Because of feminism. Way to go. Let's see, what's the next Battleground? Oh, the Gillette ad, right? The Gillette ad, where Procter and Gamble's the reason I say Procter and Gamble, because we all know Gillette is one of the companies that make up Procter and Gamble, or maybe we don't all know that. I just want to make sure everybody knows that Gillette is not the top of the food chain in that company structure. No, it's Procter and Gamble. Procter and Gamble, the same people that own Tide, the same people that own Old Spice, the same people that own Charmin toilet paper, the same, they own so many huge products that if you're going to boycott Gillette, well, you got to figure out all kinds of other things to boycott too if you're really serious about it. But what business does that corporate behemoth have in telling an entire generation of men how they should behave? They don't have any business doing that. That is not their purpose on this planet. Their purpose on this planet is to make themselves profits, not to lecture identity politics to a generation of men that have been lacking in proper male role models because of a generation of bad laws that have taken male role models out of the traditional family. So we have a whole slew of millennials that are growing up being raised by single women or very little male, not seeing their father very often at all. And they don't know how to be a man. They don't know what masculinity is because they haven't witnessed it firsthand in their life. But yet we can dare, as a corporate giant behemoth like Gillette, to make a commercial and tell that group that is very, what's the word, impressionable or confused about their place in this planet as men because they didn't really have decent role models. I mean, some of them may have, but by and large, the 20 to 30-year-olds now compared to 20, 30-year-olds 40 years ago, those 20, 30-year-olds had far more fathers in the equation because divorce wasn't something that everyone just did whenever they wanted because, hey, there was consequences to divorce. Now the only consequences to divorce are for men. For women, divorce is it's a fine thing. In fact, it's a good way to financially improve your situation. Go get married and get divorced and do that 3 or 4 times and you'll be pretty well off as a woman. Wait, what? Sadly, that's true, though. Then we got Star Trek Discovery. There's another battleground for our pop cultural feminism agenda. And coming up, Captain Marvel. And even in the video game industry, we have Battlefield 5 from EA. Let's not forget the women who led World War II. Entire fictitious historical narratives made up to support a social justice warrior's desire to feminize history. Right. We have a cancer in Western society, and that cancer is very pernicious. It is known as tribalism. Tribalism is the real thing that's the problem here. When you're part of a group, you lash out against another group. I'm now part of the male group. I'm now part of the white group. I'm now part of the MGTOW group. I'm now part of the right group. So I'm a white, male, right-leaning MGTOW member. I'm part of 4 different tribes. And my tribes, they don't like the feminist tribe. But 10 years ago, I was an individual. I wasn't part of a tribe. Why did I end up part of a tribe? Because every time I turn around, I'm being attacked. Guess what, feminism? Your method of going about promoting your cause is toxic. You have created your enemy. I wasn't your enemy 10 years ago. In fact, 10 years ago, if I would have been asked about feminism, I would have been like, yeah, I'm all about feminism. Go women. Woohoo! But today, you ask me about feminism, and I'll give you a mouthful. Guarantee it. So maybe you should start thinking about your messaging. Or maybe you should start thinking about whether or not you're actually a feminist. Are you a feminist? Or are you a left-leaning politician that's using the guise of femininity to promote your leftist ideals? Or many other possible combinations therein. But no matter what it is, it's divisive. It creates division. It creates the need for conflict, debate. Sadly, we are in Western society, we have become multicultural. We are made up of so many different cultures, and so many different cultures operate on so many different rule sets. And not all of those rule sets are compatible with each other. And as long as that's the case, as long as we are made up of many different cultures, and as long as we don't know how to incorporate these different cultures and their different rule sets into a prioritized hierarchy, then we're always going to have issues. But we can talk about those issues in a productive manner, or we can be part of a tribe and toss verbal weapons at each other and continue to deride each other. Which one of those things do I think is going to happen going forward? I think we're going to continue to go down the tribalism route, to be honest. I don't have much faith that humanity, as it currently is, can sit down and have a reasonable conversation. When some of our most reasonable scholars cannot sit down and have reasonable conversations from the left to the right, well, how can us, the lay people, have a reasonable conversation if the most intellectual of us can't? I'm sorry, I know this has been a pretty deep video. It's a bit different from the video games I normally do, and yes, lately I've been doing some movies and or TV show reviews. But this does kind of correlate because pop culture is movies and TV shows, and that's how I ended up getting pulled down this rabbit trap, this rabbit hole of these concepts of feminism and tribalism and identity politics and who I am and who you are and why I'm mad and why you're mad. Well, if we understand why we're all mad, maybe we can move forward. And perhaps that's why I'm doing this video. Maybe a feminist might watch this video and be like, what? You used to consider yourself an individual? And now you consider yourself MGTOW white male that hates me? What have I done? Indeed, what have you done? That is the question I'd like you to ask yourself. Because that's what's happened. And with that, I'll end this particular video. I hope everyone appreciates. I'm Jaames Johnson. This is my channel. And please like, subscribe, all of that jazz. Until next time, peace.